Hello, my name is Travis Cobb. I'm a master's student for industrial and organizational psychology here at Liberty University. This is my oral midterm exam questions and answers. For the first question given is, how have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? Give an example of an event and the resulting outcome. I would lend it to say that if most of the 20th century and for the first few decades of the 21st has been rife with change. With the industrialization of whole nations, we saw a need to drastically grow organizations in both size and scope and purpose, so that recruitment of specific skill sets became vital for organizations and companies to acquire the right people for the right jobs. And speaking of jobs, the very definition of what was a job began to evolve as well. No longer were there just careers, but there was an ever-growing requirement for temporary work that would be filled or could be filled by almost anyone. This shift allowed for a rapid diversification of the workforce as a whole, and we saw not only people of different ethnicities and backgrounds, but differing genders as well. World War II was a prime example of that, where you had millions of men across the country being called to arms, and it left a considerable gap in the workforce on the home front, much of which was factory or construction labor that couldn't be readily filled by the young or the too old, but women, who usually were relegated to housework, were more than willing to step up and help drive the industrial might of the United States during the war. And this shift didn't remain as a wartime necessity, but it propelled the advancement of women in the workplace through the rest of the century. Women provided the world with that they are equally capable of taking on the hard jobs and the decisions and getting it done. And this altered the course of what people previously believed the workplace to be. And psychologists took notice of that. These organizations are made up of people with individual requirements and necessities that must be met in order to get the best out of them. In order to do that, organizations must understand the very people that make it run. From the folks on the line to those in the head office, relationships are forged, right, everything in between, and those are integral to the success of the organization. The second question is, describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? So the socialization process is where organizations attempt to transform a new hire or employee into a full-fledged member of that organization. Each organization structures their process differently, but there are a few basic factors that tend to remain the same from company to company, organization to organization. Specifically, they include what Chow and his associates classified as the 6 dimensions of organizational socialization: history, language, politics, people, the goals and values of the organization, and performance proficiency. Starting with history, really you're talking about the origins of the organization. Where it all started. Was it in a garage like Google, or was it an idea like Ford to create something innovative and unique? The language, being a member of the military as I am, there is definitely a distinct language that's found there, most of which are acronyms that are either well-defined or just made up on the fly. But that's a process that you have to learn in regards to how to communicate in that organization. Politics kind of goes along with language a little bit, and just being how do you navigate that organization and kind of the nuances that happen there. The people really is the next one, like the people that you'll work with, not only as peers, but also your subordinates and your leaders and those who supervise you and those who supervise them. Everything's interconnected, and so to understand those dynamics is really important, especially if you're going to be involved in become like that full-fledged member, as previously stated. The goals and values of the organization, that's really defined as the purpose of the organization. I think that's truly integral in how organizations socialize new employees, is communicating clearly the purpose of the organization, the purpose of the job that they will be doing. And then finally, the performance proficiency, what it takes to actually get the job done, having those technical skills to complete the tasks that you're given. All of these are critical components in creating a successful and comprehensive socialization program, and it establishes relationships between new and existing employees, and it sets the proper expectations for both the employee and the employer. It flattens the communication between the two so that what remains is little uncertainty. So that uncertainty level is taken down when expectations are clearly defined, both for the employee and employer. I believe that one of the most important aspects of the program are ensuring that those newcomers, again, understand that purpose of the organization and where they fit in that purpose. If an organization can succeed in providing something that the new employees can internalize and take responsibility for, then the job embeddedness is almost an assurity. When we feel, speaking from experience, when we feel that what we do matters and that it makes a difference, we feel attached and that we matter as well. It's in our nature as people to be communal and to want to make a difference and to prove our worth to that community that we're attempting to gain membership to. If we feel that we're contributing and that we're valued and truly accepted into that community, or in this case an organization, it becomes like a second family. The next question is, how can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? A work-family conflict has existed just about as long as man has had to toil in life. Priorities shift, relationships may suffer as a consequence. People have always existed kind of in this dichotomy where they're split between two worlds or two responsibilities. And this tends to breed conflict in more than one way. However, at the present, organizations have placed a considerable amount of effort in reducing the amount of conflict that may arise both at work and at home. They see their employees as people, not all organizations, but a growing number, and understand that people have requirements and that people have emotions and they stress and they're trying to resolve those and better equip those. So some of the things that we look at is for an organization that may be able to reduce conflict is by implementing programs or providing resources dedicated to the family, whether it's the family, the extended family of the employee if they're unmarried, or their spouse, or their children, or both, and just bringing that family into the fold of the organization, not just the employee, and including them as part of the larger organizational family. And that's a start. Ensuring that not only does the employee understand the purpose behind their work, but the family does as well, so that the family can support the employee and kind of get behind them and encouraging them to do what it is that they're called to do. Secondly, supervisory support at the organization is essential. It's important in that the supervisor understands the amount of stress that their employees or their subordinates go through, and that they're looking out for them. They're servant leaders rather than just taskmasters. If the supervisor is supportive of the employees' needs at home, you could see a considerable drop in the frequency of conflict both at work and home, because you're reducing those stress levels, you're reducing that uncertainty, you're encouraging or at least instilling a sense of confidence in that your leadership is looking out for you. And finally, the organization should be providing resources that assist its employees with the ability to cope at a more personal level with the day-to-day stressors associated with their job. It's nearly impossible to eliminate all conflict and all stressors, but by providing employees tools to address the things that they see in the day-to-day, and to assist families as well with the very same resources, you could see a significant reduction in work-family conflict. The next question is, imagine you have been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques could you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? So job performance, as described in the book, is one of the more complex subjects to really define and analyze. It can be seen as so much more than just mere task completion. A more holistic approach is required in order to attain a more accurate read on an individual's ability to complete and perform in what they do. The primary dimensions that are observed and evaluated are those that the individual accomplishes as like in-role task completion and also out-of-role or extra-role. The in-role accomplishments are tasks completed within the parameters of the job itself. So it is things like, for instance, with me, I'm a planner at the division level of my organization, and so what I do is pretty much write operations orders and annexes. It's like that's one of the things that's kind of an end goal. However, some of those extra role things that we see are the behaviors observed and with interactions with people or other departments. So, and again, with usually using myself as an example, I'm completing the tasks of writing orders and annexes associated with my job, but in order to do so, I have to collaborate and communicate with 4, 5, 6 different organizations within the greater organization in order to accomplish that task. I have to reach out to people for information, and I have to reach out to other planners to ensure that we're synced together in our efforts. There are a number of ways to evaluate an employee, but my belief is that high-fidelity simulations are probably one of the better and more controlled ways of doing so. Significant work has to be done up front to create the appropriate scenario required. However, it would provide enough representation of all dimensions of the job performance that's being evaluated. It will provide the evaluator with proper insight in how employees react to certain situations, and that can be the conditions set in the simulation itself. A possible other way, that's I think a little bit less practical, but it's really the only other comprehensive way I can think of at the moment, is that it would be a semi-anonymous observation of the employee in their day-to-day work, kind of like a longevity study where they're observed over a longer period of time. The only problem with that is that there's less control with it. The conditions that are set, though they're real world and probably have high validity, don't necessarily represent what they do day to day, because there might be certain things that pop up, whether they're sick or there's certain stressors that are extraneous to that point in time, or they may not be busy at all, and so you're not really seeing much task accomplishment. So I believe going back to that high fidelity simulation example, I think, is probably going to be the most comprehensive way of evaluating job performance. And finally, the last question here was, what are some possible common organizational constraints and how could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? Really what we're looking at as organizations, the constraints that organizations may impose upon their employees are things like unnecessary rules or regulations, or they're poorly equipping their employees. That equipment can be really seen as actual equipment, something that's required to actually complete the task at hand, a physical item, whether it's like a factory setting or construction, or in my case, again, military-wise, it's like if we do not have the appropriate communications equipment or weapons, for that matter, to wage war. That may seem violent, but at the same time, it's like a soldier without a functional weapon, or one that's not well maintained, it's dangerous and can be very frustrating. And the same thing, again, as with the unnecessary rules and regulations, it can really build up that level of frustration because you don't feel like you're valued and that your time is valued. you're no longer seen as a person. Instead, the organization sees you, at least the perception is there, that the organization sees you as a means to an end versus a valued member of a family. This frustration that can grow can breed resentment, and then employees can lash out in various forms. Some of the ways that they can lash out are by slacking off. I believe it's, what was it called? Production deviance, where they're basically just saying, hey, if my time is not really valued, I'm not going to put much effort into the job at hand. I might do the minimal amount of work in order to get the job done, but I'm not going to work harder than I have to, just because I'm looking out for me now because no one else is. The other thing is that you're looking at possible theft. It's like, if the company or organization doesn't value me or my time as an individual, then nothing really here must have much value, and therefore they're devalued, and so it becomes easier to just take, whether it's taking time or taking physical items. Of course, there's more extreme examples like violence or sabotage, but I believe it gets after the intent of the question, is that when employees aren't valued and that they're not sought after as contributing members to the organization, they pretty much, I wouldn't say give up, but they definitely think less of what they do, and part of their identity is lost as well. But I believe that's it for the quiz and the questions. I appreciate your time, and thank you.